Hey everybody, I'm Gino Reynolds from The Real Opinion. There are many great debates in movies and we as fans have a lot of fun with these debates. Things like, who's your favorite Batman? Star Wars versus Star Trek? Captain Kirk or Captain Picard? Last week the name of the next James Bond film was released and that got me thinking about one of my favorite debates. Who is your favorite James Bond? For me, all the different actors that have played the super spy have brought something positive to the table. Except for George Lazenby, because come on, his movie was just terrible. Connery was the first and the trendsetter. Lazenby was not Connery, and that's why they brought Connery back. Moore at the time seemed to be the older, classy gentleman spy. Dalton tried to be the darker Bond a bit before its time. Brosnan was, at the time, a modernized version of Bond. It wasn't until Daniel Craig took the reins that the films really started to become the Bond movies that I wanted to see. In all honesty, for me, it only comes down to two of these guys, Connery and Craig. While I understand that Connery's version of the character is probably closer to the vision of Ian Fleming, it is Craig's version that really has resonated with me. There are many reasons for this, but it really only came down to a few scenes in 2006's Casino Royale. The first reason was the very first scene. Since this was technically a reboot of the franchise, we get to see Bond earn his 00 status at the beginning of the film. Not to spoil too much if you haven't already seen it, but the whole scene sets up the dirty and gritty tone for the entire movie. The action is brutal and unforgiving. It sets up the overall nature of this new James Bond perfectly. I was hooked from the first frame, and Casino Royale has been my favorite Bond film since. One thing that has always bothered me about the character is that he sometimes puts the needs of the Bond girls ahead of his mission. In Casino Royale, this changes for the better. Bond begins to seduce the wife of one of the villains of the film. During the scene, she takes a phone call in which Bond overhears that her husband is making his move. Instead of taking the time to do what all the other Bonds would have done, Craig's Bond just walks away from a sure thing. For this Bond, the mission is the most important thing. For this Bond, Queen and country come first. As for the other Bonds, well, you know. Two other quick things I like about Craig's Bond. Though it isn't the first time, we get to see a vulnerable Bond let his walls down and fall in love. Secondly, his Bond is extremely tough, and you all know the scene I'm talking about. While I love Casino Royale, it did feel it was missing some of that classic Connery feel. With the release of Skyfall, it seems that they are making a return to those types of films. The name of the new Bond film is Spectre, which is the name of the group of villains that the classic Bond always faced off against. Christoph Waltz joins the cast as a quote-unquote classic Bond villain, which hopefully means he'll be playing Blofeld. A lot of good things could come from this, and while I welcome this in a way, I hope that they don't lose the good things that they have come out with this new style of Bond. So there you have it, Daniel Craig is my favorite Bond. That being said, none of the other movie Bonds would have existed without one Sir Sean Connery. But remember, it's only just one guy's opinion. Until next time, the name's Reynolds, Gino Reynolds.